Hello, my name is Bill Berquist, and I'm one of the co-founders of the Library Professional Coaching. We're offering a series of video casts that we hope are informative for you. We hope they provide new information, that they are of help to you in your role as a coach, as a consultant, or as a therapist. This particular video class I'm calling Sleep and Motivating the Movement. This is the second in a series on sleep, pathways to sleep. It has to do with the major project we're doing now on identifying more than 70 pathways to sleep. These pathways are clustered into four kinds. One is healthy habits that enable us to get a better night's sleep. Secondly, what do we do in preparation for sleep? Third, what about the sleep environment itself? And fourth, what about various aids, medications, foods, and things we can take to aid us to have a high quality of sleep? So the first component is about health. And several of the video casts I will be doing are going to focus on the issue of health and how healthy habits help us with sleep. So motivating the movement. What we find in our preliminary studies on pathways to sleep, that the highest rated of all pathways, rated by the experts and rated by people who are trying to get a good night's sleep, highest rated pathway is exercise. So we all know that if we get a good day of exercise in, our sleep that night is likely to be better. So why don't we exercise more often? Or even at all for some of us? Well, several things. Obviously, one is the habit. We have a habit of doing whatever we do during the day, and it may not include exercise. Secondly, for many of us, we don't have enough time to exercise. We're scrambling. Matter of fact, if we take time to exercise, then we may not have time for a full night of sleep. So it feels like a trade-off to us. Third, there are costs associated with exercise, with getting a treadmill or joining a health club or something, or just the costs associated with the lack of enjoyment in doing exercise. So part of what I want to do in motivating the movement, I want to talk in a few minutes about what we can do to increase the chances we'll actually do exercise. But first of all, just let me pause for a moment about why does exercise make a difference in terms of sleep? Well, there's several factors, and I don't want to get into the technical aspects, but just some obvious things. First of all, when we exercise, we tend to get tired. Our muscles get tired. We get tired in a lot of ways, and we want to try and get some sleep or rest. So that's obviously an obvious reason why we exercise. But it becomes very interesting. What if we exercise in the morning? Does that really impact on quality of sleep, many hours later in the day? Well, there's a number of factors that seem to contribute to exercise in the morning making a difference with sleep in the evening. First is what we talked about in the first video cast, which is the circadian rhythm or circadian cycle. What we know is that sun has a real reinforcement on establishing a strong cycle that enables us to sleep at night. Well, it appears that exercise also, not quite as great as sun, but exercise also, if it's done early in the morning, tends to reinforce the cycle. We've gotten up in the morning and we're active. This is important because it reinforces the fact that we're up, we're awake, and we're active, we're moving. Second, there's a whole lot of stuff about metabolism, about what our body is doing. This obviously also relates to the circadian cycle, but essentially we establish a strong pattern in terms of metabolism in our body. Third, it seems to impact on our mental health. That is, when we do exercise, that tends to provide us with a healthier attitude regarding our life. We know that exercise, for instance, reinforces a certain mental patterns. For instance, when we're exercising, even if it's on a treadmill, our body thinks we're actually moving through the environment, through the landscape, and it activates certain parts of our brain, which are very healthy for us. Finally, it appears that that exercise is stress reducing. We know that from many different studies. This also has to do with the thing I talked about in the first video cast about freeze and getting away from freeze. Exercise is a way to essentially reduce the negative impact of freeze and enables us to be in a better place to sleep at night. So what about motivating the movement? Well, obviously one motivation is health. That is that when we exercise, we are healthier. Has to do with all the way from heart conditions to diabetes to all sorts of things. And it impacts on sleep. So to be healthy is a good thing, and exercise is a way to remain healthy. But once again, for some of us, that's just not enough. Getting up and just doing exercise for health just isn't enough of a motivation. So I want to mention three other motivators that often are not mentioned. First, obviously, is exercise that's done on behalf of recreation. How do we find things that we can do that we love to do, whether it's bowling or playing basketball or just going out and hiking, whatever it is, recreation that we love doing, do more of it. That's fine. That is exercise. We don't have to be on a treadmill. We can do something that we really love to do. So think about what is it that you love doing and how do you do that with recreation? How do you go in there with a group of women who all want to play a game of basketball, or go out with someone and play a game of tennis, or whatever it is, or just walk, take a nice walk, or walk with your dog. This would be wonderful. Now, there's a third motivator. So there's health, there's recreation. The third one is what I'm calling avocation, that are things that we want to do that aren't directed toward exercise, but involve exercise. For instance, gardening. What about if you want to have that garden, a beautiful garden in the spring and into the summer with flowers, or you're wanting to raise vegetables? That gardening is itself a form of exercise. What if it's about weaving that you want to do, or knitting? It may not be a high level of exercise, but that's also very helpful. So think about what are the things you want to accomplish that require physical activity or physical movement. How do you increase your activities in that level so you can accomplish something that's important to you, even if it's not specifically about exercise, about movement? There is then a fourth motivator, and this is one we often forget about. That is not avocation, but vocation. That some of us are in doing work out in the world that requires physical exercise. Whether we're a carpenter, or whether we're laying carpet, or whether we're in construction, that's exercise. It's what one of the commentators on news programs used to say: this is for the men and women who take a shower at the end of the workday because they've been very active all day long. This is wonderful. And so to the extent that you're involved in avocational activities, things that, that have a goal other than exercise, or whether it's part of your job, that's important, and that counts as very good exercise. So just to sum up what I've been saying, what we know is exercise is probably the best pathway to sleep. We also know that we have habits to break, we don't have sufficient time to exercise, and there are costs associated with it. and particularly sometimes we don't enjoy the exercise itself. What we know is that even exercise in the morning really helps us at night with sleep. The interesting thing is the one time not to exercise typically is right before you go to sleep. If you're going to exercise in the evening, do it at least 1 to 1.5 hours before you fall asleep. But there's a lot of reasons why exercise in the morning carries over into the evening, and things that have to do with mental health, has to do with physical processes, a whole lot of things that carry over during the day into the evening. Perhaps most importantly, the exercise reinforces the circadian cycle, the powerful rhythms in our life that help us sleep in the evening. So I'm also mentioning, so what are the motivators? And I've talked about health itself and how do you frame it in a way that being healthy is really important to you. You may want to say, what are the side benefits from being healthy? If you're healthy, then the other things you can do, probably you can do easier. If you're healthy, it's going to be easier to recreate, it's going to be easier to do your job, and it's going to be easier to participate in these avocational endeavors. So we do it for the health. We do it because it's links to the recreation. And I love that the word recreation comes recreation. And so how does recreation help us recreate? Third, obviously, I talked about avocation. How do we essentially link exercise into things that we want to do that are important to us? And how do we do that more often? Not because we want to have a beautiful garden, but also because working on that garden helps us with our health and getting a good night's sleep. If nothing else, at night we can dream of pansies. We can dream of a beautiful tree that we have planted that took some physical effort. And finally, we need to recognize that some of us are in vocations that require exercise. Clearly, in the past, most of us were doing work as adults that required physical exercise. We were farmers. We were coal miners. We were lumbermen. We were cooks. We cleaned the house every day. We washed the clothes by hand. We were exercising whether we wanted to or not. Today, many of us are in jobs that are more sedentary, and we have to find other ways to find the exercise. So in the midst of the struggle to overcome old habits, to find time for exercise, and to balance off the cost of exercise, in the midst of those challenges, there are the real hopes and possibilities to get exercise for many different reasons. There is, as I've said at the end of every video cast, a pony in there somewhere. So thank you very much.